Tonight, Question Time comes from Bishop Stortford in Hertfordshire. Our audience, as always, reflects the voting record and electoral picture across the nation. Welcome to Question Time on the BBC News Channel, on the BBC iPlayer and Sounds. Tonight's panel, Heidi Alexander, the Cabinet Minister with responsibility for renationalising the railways. From the Conservatives, Helen Whately, who's been given the job of drawing up the party's plans to slash the welfare bill. Lisa Smart is the Lib Dem MP for Hazel Grove in Stockport and one of the party's rising stars. The author and journalist Ash Sarkar is a self-styled communist who says courage and collective action are capable of wondrous things. And Matthew Syed, the former table tennis champion turned writer and broadcaster, he once ran for Labour but has just come out as a Conservative supporter. Good evening, welcome to our panel. Very nice to see you, welcome to our audience. Very good to see you, of course, here in Bishop Stortford, in this beautiful school where we are tonight. And, of course, welcome to you at home. Do join in the conversation on social media. Just sit back and watch, whichever you prefer. Right, let's take our first question, which is from Gordon Dawes.
Are we, as a nation, paying enough tax to support the public services we say we want and come to rely on?
So the government promised not to raise income tax, national insurance or VAT, but the Chancellor has said now that she is looking at tax and spending, and higher taxes on the wealthy will be part of the story. Heidi Alexander.
So, Gordon, I think you raise a really important question about how we pay for the standard of public services that people rightly want and expect in this country. And we were elected last year, the Labour government, on a promise to invest in our public services, in the NHS, recruit more GPs, get hospital waiting lists down, investing our schools and make sure that councils have sufficient money to carry out the things that we rely upon, getting our bins collected and making sure that the street lighting is working, for example. And the decisions that the Labour government took at the last budget weren't easy. We stuck to our promise of not raising income tax, VAT, apart from taking those exemptions away on private school fees. And we didn't put up employees' national insurance contributions, but we did ask businesses to pay a bit more so we could get that £26 billion worth of investment into the NHS. And that's delivered 5 million more appointments.
Obviously, everyone here has lived through that, so that quite a lot of that I think we're familiar with. But what it sounds like now is that the Chancellor is softening us up for higher taxes, and she talks about higher tax on the wealthy will be part of the story. What can you tell us about that?
So we have always said, as the Labour Party, that a guiding principle for us is fairness in our tax system and judge us on the actions that we took last year. We do believe that those with the broadest shoulders in society should carry the greatest burden. Last year, for example, as I said, we got rid of those exemptions on private school tax fees, private school fees. We also put air passenger duty up on private jets.
But
we
what
got
about
rid of
what's
the
to come,
loopholes
Heidi?
on. Well, look, the Chancellor is going to set out the budget on the 26th of November.
So there's nothing you can tell us about that.
I'm the Transport Secretary, and
No,
I'm
I
not
get
going to
that.
speculate.
But it sounds like the direction of travel
is
is higher taxes are coming in some shape or form.
So we've got to make sure we get the balance right so that we get investment into this country, so that we grow the economy and get the economy firing on all cylinders. Because ultimately, if you don't get the tax receipts through companies to invest in public services, then we're not going to get the sort of public services that I think the British people aspire to.
Gordon, where are you? Let's get the microphone back to Gordon.
It seems to me that we know all the public services are struggling. We all want them to work. We need them to work. And nobody wants to pay for them. And that debate has to get real. And I think the Chancellor is beginning to tell the story that needs to be told.
So if there were higher taxes to come, would you be prepared to pay them?
Well, I'm not going to dodge them.
Well said, especially on national television. Helen.
Gordon, I'm going to answer your first question straight, and I'm going to disagree with your follow-up there, which is I feel very strongly that as a country, we're paying too much tax. Public services depend on a strong economy, and the high tax levels that we've got are killing our economy. That's the problem. I'll give you a very specific example that the Chancellor put up national insurance on jobs. She created a higher jobs tax at her last budget. That has been extremely hard for businesses. I've lost count of the number of businesses who've told me how much that has added to their pay bill, that they're having to let people go or freeze their recruitment. There have been 100,000 fewer jobs as a result of that. It's really been a contribution to the lower levels of growth that we've seen in the economy. That is a very bad thing. It's a bad thing for the economy. It's a bad thing for all those livelihoods of people who've either been made redundant or not got into work. Something I care a lot about is the work I do as Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, and looking at how we can get people off benefits into work.
Well, let's talk about that then, given that that is your specialist area, Helen.
Our economy is weaker. We can't pay for the things that people care so much about,
how
whether it's public services or,
then?
crucially, defence in a dangerous world.
How would you pay? Part of your remit is cutting the welfare bill. How much do you want to cut it by?
So
who's going to lose out?
So we set out at our party conference last week that we were going to bring down the deficit and we're going to reduce tax levels. And we spoke very specifically about cancelling, ending stamp duty as a tax.
I'm asking about the welfare bill.
I'll come to it. We said how it would be funded.
You're here to represent the DWP.
Funded. I will do that. It would
well, let's do that straight away then.
State. So, and we said we would do £47 billion worth of savings, including £23 billion worth of welfare savings.
And so who is going to lose out then? Because clearly some people are not going to get
So I've been doing the hard work, and to me this is a contrast.
Great, well, let's hear it. Can you answer the question? Who here, I'm sure, do you want to know?
Yes, OK.
Who here is going to lose out?
And I know in here, I'm sure there are people who receive benefits to help with the struggles of life. And I absolutely know that there are people who disabilities, illness,
who's not
need
going to
help.
get it?
But the problem is our benefits bill is ballooning. Sickness benefits going up to 100 billion by the end of this decade.
So
6.5 million people of working age on out-of-work benefits. So I've set out ways that we would achieve savings and things that I think that the Labour government should do. So firstly, one of the things we've said is that people with low-level mental health conditions should not be continuing to get sickness benefits. And I say that, I know that people are struggling with their mental health. I came into Parliament as somebody campaigning on mental health care, calling for better mental health care for people with serious mental illness. I worked on improving the mental health care in A&E. However, I am absolutely certain that there is an opportunity to, A, not be giving sickness benefits for some things like, for instance, ADHD. And actually, the crucial thing is to be supporting people in that situation to be in work. Too many people are being signed off benefits.
Is that going to save 22 billion?
To a life on welfare. That particular area is estimated to forecast to save about 7 to 9 billion
just give us one other example, because I must let other people speak.
One of the areas. Another
example where you're going to cut
Another example, as we've said, that we shouldn't be giving benefits to people who are not British citizens, specifically a group of people who have indefinite leave to remain. If you're here in the UK, you need to be contributing to the economy and not drawing on our benefits system.
OK. I'll come to you back. Just let me speak from the audience. Just one here in front.
So the gentleman said, should we be paying for the services that we want? So I want to take it back to that question. I'm a UK accountant myself. I support local businesses and young entrepreneurs, and all I am doing is helping them struggle. It is ridiculous the way our economy is currently, the state of our economy. 94% of accountants have no faith in the economy. 64% of them don't see any light of this getting any better. Where have we've lost track of value for money. So you talk about how much you've pumped into the NHS and the services you've added and the money you've spent, but there's no value for money. We've lost the basic principles, the foundations that support the things that we're trying to put into place. They don't work. So we could pump as much money as we want into trying to make the NHS better, but it's not going to be better until the fundamental principles and the groundwork gets sorted. And that is where we don't have value for money. And what I want to say is, in terms of raising taxes even further, if I was supporting a business and they come to me and they were in a very black hole like we are, and they said, but it's okay, we're going to raise our prices to our customers, I wouldn't say that was a good idea. I'd be like, how do your customers currently feel? How do they feel like they're getting value for money? Let's look at other strategies. Let's look at cost savings. Let's look at how we can build efficiency and stop wasting time. The amount of wasted resource we have in this country. Something has to change.
There's a woman at the back who has her hand up. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, tax rates are at the highest that they've been in this country since the Second World War. We really need to look for lower tax rates and therefore to reduce spending, but to drive productivity through the adoption of AI much more quickly. You know, what do the panel think about the rate of adoption of AI within our public services, and how can we do more there to drive forward productivity so we don't need to push up taxes?
Well, if you'll forgive me, I'm going to park AI for the moment because I have a feeling we might come to that later, but thank you. Matthew.
Thank you. Can I invite the audience to try and think of this through a different lens? Was there not a time when this country was the most dynamic and powerful in the world? Between 1820 and 1920, we were the envy of the world. Why? Because we built.
We
built
also had an
roads
empire, that probably helped.
Well, that's part. Look, I don't dispute that's partly to do with it, but we also were at the cutting edge of science and technology, and we built roads and rail and bridges and energy infrastructure. And people around the world looked at us as a can-do nation, entrepreneurial and dynamic. That is where we rose to power and one of the most enviable nations on earth. What has happened since then? Forgive me for reading this out, but do we build these days? The planning documentation for the Lower Thames crossing, this is a tunnel under the Thames connecting Kent and Essex, runs to 360,000 pages. The application process alone cost 300 million. That is more than twice as much as it cost Norway to actually build the longest road tunnel in the world. We're paralysed. We don't build nuclear power stations. And when we do, it takes 10 years to get from consultation to a shovel in the ground, sometimes longer. That means per megawatt hour, we're paying 4 times as much as South Korea. Electricity prices in this country, because of decades of political paralysis, are the highest in the world. How on earth are you supposed to fund growth, get the tax revenue that enables us to pay for great public services when we're snookered by process, by planning, by endless consultation?
So in terms of the question then, are you saying it's not raising taxes is neither here nor there?
There are countries in the world that have higher taxes than the UK that grow reasonably fast. There are places in the world that have lower taxes, like the United States, that grow faster than the UK. We are unique in our political sclerosis. We need governments that are able... But why do we not build? Because governments are so scared of upsetting people. Whenever you build anything, some local people are going to be upset. Is that fair? I might be one of the local people being upset. But if every nationally beneficial project is vetoed by local concerns, it means that every locality in the country becomes upset because we don't have the growth. Productivity has been... Forgive me, I'm going on a...
You're going on quite a long time, Matthew. I do know, but I think you...
I'm frustrated, but productivity has been... If I may say so, productivity in this country has been stagnant for almost 2 decades. That is our problem.
Woman in the pink jacket.
So I work in the public sector. I work very closely with local authorities, with the NHS, with the police. I've worked in there for 7 or 8 years. All we've seen are years and years of cuts to funding for services for people that need them. I'm sure many of my colleagues would agree with me. We don't really care how that investment comes into public services. When is it going to happen?
Right, and Matthew's saying higher taxes neither here nor there. Would you be prepared to pay more taxes to do that?
Yes.
OK, and there's a man just a little bit further along there. Yeah.
Yeah, Matthew talks about looking at it through a different lens. If we need to be looking at it through the eyes of the most vulnerable in society, I feel quite angry at the thought that taxes are at the highest they've ever been, and yet, obviously, clearly, we're spending that money in the wrong places. If we are not supporting the most vulnerable, the unpaid carers who are preventing social care from collapsing, if we're not supporting the disabled children who can't get specialist provision for their education, then we're clearly spending that money in the wrong places. We need equity and justice for our most vulnerable. They need to be the number one priority, because I work in education. If in education we say, if we get it right for the most vulnerable, we get it right for everyone.
Okay. Ash.
There are two things in this country which are unfortunately really true. One is everything is too expensive, and the other is nothing works. And that's the picture of our public services, and I think that's why people feel so frustrated. And everything that you can see in politics, whether it's the Tories' collapse last year, the fact that this Labour government polls worse than a cold sore, that people are flocking to reform, that the Greens are racing up the polls, it's because of these two facts. Everything is too expensive and nothing works. And taxation is a part of that, but I'm going to come to that in a second. The first thing I actually want to talk about is where we're paying too much money. So £200 billion of our money has been paid out to shareholders for privatised utilities like rail and mail and energy and buses and stuff of that nature. That's money that could have gone into reducing customers' bills or investing in infrastructure. It hasn't. It's gone out in the form of shareholder profit. Or if you look at social care, which is really the monster under the bed whenever you look at any local authority's budget, the role of private equity is disgusting. So nearly a quarter of foster placements and children's residential homes are run by companies backed by private equity, and they're looking for profit margins of about 20% or more. So it's hugely expensive for local authorities, and that money isn't going into workers' wages, it's going into private equity. So the first thing we need to do is admit that privatisation has been a failed experiment, it has cost this country dearly, and it is an experiment that needs to end. The second thing that I want to talk about is where actually the tax burden needs to shift. So, Gordon, you were the one who raised the question first, right? Can I ask you a personal question? Are you a billionaire?
No.
Then you're probably paying enough tax. So there are 50 families in the UK who have more wealth than 50% of this country combined. And half of billionaire wealth comes from inheritance, it comes from hoarding property, and it comes from finance. So we're not talking about businesses that employ people, we're not talking about socially productive uses of capital, we're talking about hoarding things. And it means that, as the lady in the front row was talking about, ordinary workers, but also small to medium businesses, are getting muscled out. And then they're the ones who've been hit with things like the increase in national insurance contributions from employers.
But Ash, some of those billionaires will be companies, will be people who start up their own companies. There are some notable British people who've done that and made a small fortune doing it and employ lots of people.
Ash, what about them leaving the country?
So,
they're quite mobile, these rich
Matthew,
people.
I knew you were going to say that, and believe me, I have a response for you. So the first thing is that when you have a tendency towards monopoly, so fewer companies and they're bigger companies, they're kind of job eradicators because they're muscling those small to medium companies out of the way. The second thing is, will those billionaires leave? Some will, but where much of the bulk of this wealth is being hoarded in the form of property, they can't take the buildings with them. And so, God forbid, ordinary families get to buy some of those houses and they don't have to compete with billionaires anymore. It's billionaire
especially because the property I'm thinking of in
London,
London, most people couldn't afford it. But I hear your point. Lisa.
So when the Conservatives left office, or rather were removed from office in the middle of last year, there was a real sense of we're all paying a lot of tax and we're not seeing enough in our public services, which I think is where Gordon's question comes from. You know, my local hospital, Stepping Hill, has a repairs backlog of £138 million. And what that means is our hard-working NHS staff are operating in a building that in some cases is not really fit for purpose. So the Labour government inherited a really big problem, and there was a lot of hope when they came in. And I think that's why a lot of people are really disappointed that some of the decisions that this government has taken have not played out how they expected. So if I think about the businesses in my patch, they do talk about the national insurance charge rises, and they do talk about the impact that's having on their decisions about whether they can hire new staff or not. And what that means is that we've got fewer people being employed, them paying in more and more. And so some of these decisions have a really big impact, both in the short term, but also the medium term as well, meaning fewer people are employed, paying in and things like that. We Liberal Democrats think that the Labour government's making some of the wrong choices when it comes to tax and spend. We think also that cutting some things early makes it cost more later on. So think about public health. So this is smoking cessation programmes, weight management programmes. Cutting the money that's available for those just means that people are costing the system more later on because they're struggling with their health. So there is a balance between spending money on public services we need, but also bringing in the tax. We as Lib Dems would tax different people in different ways. So I think families and households are paying too much at the moment. I don't think the online gambling companies are paying enough. I don't think that the social media global giants are paying enough. And I think you could do some really clever, sensible things with capital gains that means people that earn just a little bit of it pay less tax, but those who are treating capital gains as income and therefore paying a lower tax rate pay more. And I think that's fairer, contributes to what we as a society want. But the thing that we Lib Dems believe, and all the stats prove out, would bring more growth to our economy, because we haven't talked enough about growth, in my opinion, is if we had a customs union with the European Union, which would bring £25 billion of tax revenue into the country on an annual basis, and would mean we could do more sensible things with tax and spend that the country needs.
And, I mean, you're not in power, obviously, as Lib Dems, so you've got a lot of MPs.
We're not in power.
Most that you've had for a long time. Let me ask you, because pretty much every time a Lib Dem comes on the panel, they mention that. Would you, given that we had a referendum on Brexit and we came out, would you envisage having another referendum about that? Or would you say, as in fact, I remember Jo Swinson took a similar view, if you vote for us, that's what you're going to get?
So I'm on about a customs union, not on about rejoining
I appreciate that, but no, the fact is, of course they are, but nonetheless, it's a step in a direction that we have stepped away from. Would you just say, if you vote for the Lib Dems, that's what you're going to get?
So anything that's in a manifesto is what then a government is.
So there's no question of a referendum on that?
I think the country's had enough of referendums for a while. And I think if you clearly lay out in a manifesto what your policy platform is, as we have done in our manifestos last year and will do in the future, I think that's the conversation you have with the country, and if they like it, they vote for it, and if they don't...
OK. We could talk about it a lot longer. There's quite a few hands up. Forgive me, I'm not going to, because I want to get through 4 questions tonight, and I need to try and give them all equal billing. Let me tell you before we do where we are next week, which is Swindon, and then we're off to Bradford. So if you would like to come and be part of our audience, you live in or around Swindon next week, Bradford week after, go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there, and we would love to see you. Right, where is Justine? Justine McMahon. Off you go.
Will AI cause young people to lose confidence in their own ability and potential to think?
Now, where are you coming from with this question, Justine?
So I've noticed, and I was talking to a young person earlier this evening about a more young people feeling very conscious of getting things right rather than embracing curiosity or an exchange of ideas. And I think that there are many reasons why they are led to believe that could be the right thing vis-a-vis them
rather than thinking it through for themselves, rather than thinking it through for themselves.
Yeah, so I suppose a couple of examples are the surge in AI use in job applications. There seems to be a business in writing your essays for you in university using AI. And a recent story, just online dating, read an article...
Oh, my God, the whole gamut.
Yeah, read an article where someone had clearly missed the point because they'd used AI to answer all the questions, so the person meeting them was really excited to meet them, and then there wasn't quite the follow-through.
Right, OK. Now, we've got quite a few young people in the audience, and I'm thrilled that 2 of them put their hands up straight away. So, yes, the man there in the brown sweater, and then I'll come to you.
So, as a young person myself, obviously, I definitely agree that AI is certainly almost a safety net for young people in terms of they're so afraid of getting things wrong. But I also feel the attention span of young people is something that's really degraded over the past few years, and AI is kind of just a cheap get-out card almost. And I feel that there should be more attention put on how young people are almost not engaging even more now due to the rise of AI.
So can I ask, how old are you?
17.
So you're still at school, obviously.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's one stat compiled by the Oxford University that 98% of secondary school students say they use AI for their schoolwork. Does that include you?
I will admit to using it on occasion.
No, listen, and then he said, listen, 90, I mean, that's about everybody, isn't it? I expect that 2% probably thought, well, better not admit it, but maybe they are. And that's useful. Presumably, if everyone's doing it, you're not going to not do it, presumably.
Yes, I'd say it's useful. I would also say, though, that not many young people really think beyond just what the AI tells them.
OK, let's hear from the person sitting next to you.
So for me, personally, I've always been quite nervous around AI. However, I found that once I Googled something, I couldn't find it, used AI, and then I found I was actually starting to rely on it more and more, and I had to physically say, no, I'm not going to keep using AI. But I volunteer with young children, not young, teenagers, and I can see them discussing things, and the first thing they do is go to ChatGPT rather than actually, oh, this adult might know an answer. So they are very much relying on AI a lot more.
So do you think, in terms
opinion.
of Justine's question, it is affecting their ability
Yeah,
and confidence to think for
100%.
themselves? Right, I'm going to come to you, Pamela, I promise, with quite a few hands up. Yes, woman in the back with the glasses on.
I would say lots of people I know use AI to understand schoolwork, and then I have a conversation with them about that schoolwork, and it just seems like they haven't really understood it. So, in a way, I don't think it's very good at all if you're just using it to get answers right, and then you're not properly understanding the work. I don't think it's going to benefit you in any way.
Right, OK. And the young man in the tie there, are you at this school?
Yes, I am.
Oh, brilliant. Right, OK. I think the headmaster's sitting in the audience as well. So, you know, just so you know.
I believe we're in an age of growing technology, and I think AI is a powerful tool where if children are taught to use it in a way as an aid more than to rely on it, I think it can be really beneficial.
But do you see anything, in terms of people your age, their critical thinking is perhaps reduced by the use of AI, which is what Justine suspects?
It depends on the scenario, I guess, because our school has a strong... So, like, if you use AI, they have checks for it, so you'll be dealt with if you do use it. But when it comes to critical thinking, I think, yes, people are more prone to go to it. But again, if they're taught to use it in a way as a place to gain information on and apply it, I think then it can be
useful.
used. Yeah, it can be useful.
OK. So, Ash, as the youngest person on the panel, will it cause young people to lose confidence in their own ability and potential to think?
So Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, which is the company which owns and runs ChatGPT, this week he said, look out for the new ChatGPT update. It will allow adults to have erotic interchanges with the chatbot.
Oh, yes, I saw that. I felt slightly queasy about it.
Well, just a few years ago, Sam Altman was saying AI is going to cure cancer. And now he's saying, don't worry, you can have sex with the robot. And I think that tells you something about the direction that this is going in, which is that rather than AI being able to enhance human innovation, critical thinking, the progress of science, it's being used to exploit our insecurities. So the examples of students using it at school or university, it's being motivated by a bit of laziness, but also insecurity, a sense, if I do this, I'm not going to do it that well, so I'm going to turn to this, which makes it easier. The example that the lady gave of someone going on a date to find out that the person they'd been chatting to had been using ChatGPT for all their talking points, that's a result of the insecurity of, well, what if this person doesn't like me? And that's the thing about so many of the Silicon Valley tech bros. They're essentially emotionally maladapted psychopaths who then... They
speak very highly of you, Ash.
I mean, I'm sorry, like, they are. Who then...
And clearly they are not here to answer for themselves.
They'd have to ask ChatGPT before they could. Who then design these platforms which, bit by bit, chip away at what it means for us to be human, because it exploits our insecurities, and instead of making us more resilient, more capable, it makes us more anxious. These muscles are wearing away.
So Matthew, I want to come to you. Before I do, let me just read you out this quote. So the CEO of one particular AI company, Mistral, said the biggest risk with AI is not that it will outsmart us or become uncontrollable, but that it will make us too comfortable, too dependent, and ultimately too lazy to think or act for ourselves.
I think there's some truth in that in the short term. But I think the young man here who goes to the school... Where is the head teacher, by the way?
He's over there.
Slightly worried about a detention at something. You can't be there. But I do think... I was initially quite sceptical about the significance of AI, but having looked at it in some depth and played around with the large language models, it's pretty clear to me that this is a transformative technology, perhaps the most significant that our species has ever harnessed. And I think it can be, as you said, a tremendous force for good. I think it could potentially help us to cure cancer. But like any technology that has tremendous power for good, guess what else it has? Tremendous power for bad. All technologies are dual use. I talked a bit earlier about nuclear fission. Can help us to get cheap electricity. What else can it do? Bombs. And AI is a classic dual use technology because I don't just worry about AI turning on us when we get artificial general intelligence of the kind that Jeff Hinton, who won the Nobel Prize recently, has described. It also democratizes the capacity for any one person to destroy the rest of us. Imagine using, sorry, this is a bit depressing, but imagine using, I want to say it, using AI, which I think is perfectly conceivable, to create a pathogen with a high infection fatality rate and a long incubation period. There's no a priori bar on that being created. It could already be out there. We've already posted the DNA for Spanish flu on the internet. How many people do you think work in the Bacteriological Weapons Convention, which polices this kind of thing? 2 people. Its budget is the same as an average McDonald's. This is just one of the many risks that are coming our way. We've been around as a species for 250,000 years. For almost the entire period, we didn't have the capacity to destroy ourselves. We did cross that threshold with the invention of nuclear war. AI, in a world where you might get one psychopath, is a massive existential risk, and nobody is interested in discussing it. If I write about this for the Sunday Times, there isn't much traffic, and no politician wants to talk about it. And I do worry, Fiona, that the culture wars, woke and anti-woke, it's Freudian displacement. It's just a way of distracting ourselves from the powder keg we have placed under ourselves. The great polymath, E.O. Wilson, said we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, but godlike technology. That is the danger we face right now as a species.
Lisa.
So, Justine's question was about will AI cause young people to lose confidence in the ability to think? And as somebody who is recruiting for my team and has had 136 job applications to read through this week, there are some commonalities there that I suspect a number of the applicants have enjoyed the use of technology. And I think that could be a lack of confidence, but it could also be a bit of laziness. I think critical thinking is really important, and I think the way the best teachers work with their young people to empower them to have their best, to be the best version of themselves and to have really good critical thinking skills will be absolutely key. When I leave the studio or this school hall later today, I'm going to be going back home to my patch because at 9 a.m. tomorrow I'm doing an Internet Safety Heroes session at one of my local primary schools, and it's about how we empower children to understand this technology because they are native on this technology. You know, I'm 46, I'm far too old to ever be thriving in this way, but the kids I'm seeing tomorrow will just expect to work like this, and so they should. There's a huge opportunity with this. And of course there are risks to be balanced. Of course there are. But the best teachers evolve as time evolves, and the best teachers will empower children to use this technology so that it can fulfill its potential and not bring an end to us all in the way that we've just been cheered up here.
All right. And that's quite a thing if teachers can stop Armageddon, but...
No, teachers can empower children so that they do have the confidence to thrive with this technology and not be scared of it or lazy to rely on it.
A couple of people got their hands up. One with the glasses in the middle of the audience there.
I'm an undergraduate university student doing a humanities degree, and I think these degrees are already being hugely undervalued and and not taken for as valuable as they can be. And we've gone, in my first and second year, it was AI is not allowed. If it's used, the essay is null and void, not happening. I'm in my third and final year, and I had a lecture the other week that said, well, reference it, and, you know, we'll talk about it, and we can see where we end up. And if you use it as a starting point, it's okay. And I'm really concerned that as humanities degrees become less and less valued, that the idea that we're using AI to make essays possible means that I can no longer even go into a job interview and go, but I do write a really good essay, because who knows who actually wrote that essay, who knows who actually came up with that original thought. So I do think it's a massive issue for kind of higher education, and the value that has, particularly in the graduate recruitment space.
Okay, and the man behind you's got his hand up too.
I think bringing it down back to the young people debate, school and exams are a measure of understanding, and the way we measure that is by getting high marks. But if you don't understand why you got the high marks, when you get to a point where you get something wrong, you also won't understand that.
Spot on.
And the idiom is, you learn more from your mistakes than your successes.
Yep.
And if your success comes from AI, and you never have the failures until you hit your 20s, your 30s, how are you going to know how to deal with it?
Should be on the panel. That's brilliant. Best comment of the night.
Helen.
I think AI brings with it massive challenges, particularly in education, as has been talked about this evening, whether it's at school or in universities. Huge risks, as Matthew has talked about, but also a massive opportunity. An opportunity for us as a country, for instance, to increase our productivity in a way that we have struggled for years and years and years to improve our productivity, and on that our growth depends, and people's prospect of people having a better standard of living, along with the extraordinary, exciting things it can do for healthcare, like cures for cancer, much earlier detection of cancer, so it can be successfully treated, personalised medicine, and all sorts of things.
But in terms of people's critical thinking, which is the heart of Justine's question. Yeah. So rather than thinking, right, I mean, it's obvious, but say you, I don't know, you want to research something, you want to find out about a particular subject, instead of doing the half garden, looking at all the different things, and maybe coming up with your own conclusion about something, you can just stick it into an AI model, and then it comes up with the conclusion ready.
Yes, but it's not necessarily the right conclusion. I think some of it is learning how to use it effectively and when to use it, and also knowing how to criticise what it serves up. You can do a search on AI and look at it, and it will give you the wrong answer or a biased answer. It'll take the point of view of the sources that it happens to have looked at. So actually learning how to use it effectively is the key. And actually, I think that's the key, whether it's for kids and students at university, but also for us people who are already in work, whether you, Lucy, you say you're 46, I'm a few years older than that, but actually, throughout our economy and throughout businesses and people who are already far through their careers, everybody needs to be learning how to use it effectively to make the most of it, because actually the countries that really learn to use it effectively are the ones who are going to succeed, and we want to be winners in this.
Let me just bring Heidi as well, because I haven't had a chance to speak there.
So look, I agree with a lot of what has been said on the panel, particularly by Lisa. I agree with what Helen has said there. I think there's a massive challenge for the education sector about how we create classrooms and education systems that are fit for the 21st century. And I think that the evolution of technology also sits alongside a period of acute anxiety for a lot of young people. So the question about loss of confidence, I think we need to be asking ourselves, what skills do we want to equip our young people with? The ability to interrogate and appraise information is really important. The ability to be able to speak confidently and to disagree with civility is also really important. And, I know that our Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, is completely appraised of this need to make sure that as technology develops and the opportunities are there to gather and harness information and find the cure to cancer and whatever Matthew has said, we also really need to think about how we are equipping our young people, not only for the world of work, but also how to be good citizens. And at heart, we also have to address this age of anxiety that I think we're living in.
May I make a...
Okay. Let me bring Ash, and then I'll come to you.
Yes, thank you.
And reasonably briefly, because I want to move.
Very briefly, I just think you guys are being way too casual about how this stuff is designed specifically to bypass user awareness. So simply empowering teachers to teach kids about how to use AI, that can't keep up with the minds in Silicon Valley who are paid millions and billions of dollars to work out ways to get past those teachers. And we've seen this happen with social media. Social media has been allowed to prey on young people. And I'm not just talking about things like abusive content, I'm just talking about the all-out assault on people's attention span, their sense of self, the fact that you're constantly on Instagram or TikTok hating yourself because you're looking at these altered images of people and increasingly AI images of people. That's happened because, you know, politicians weren't able to take the real threat of this stuff all that seriously. And one thing I'll leave you with is this, which is if you read interviews with tech CEOs from the States, they don't let their children have smartphones. Why? Because they know that they're designed to be addictive and to dull the senses and to make us more inhibited human beings. And that's my fear with AI. Not that it can't be put to socially useful things. Of course it can be. But the direction of travel is going to follow the same thing as social media, which is that's going to prey on young people. And I don't think primary school teachers can cope with that.
I agree.
Can I just challenge the idea that interacting with AI is a mindless activity? It can be mindless when you ask, for example, AI to write an essay that you're not equipped to write yourself. But anyone who's played around with one aspect of AI, which is the large language models, will have noticed something, I hope. The quality of the answers provided depends on the quality of the questions asked.
Yeah.
Now, asking,
and it's improved in recent months as well. It iterates.
It's improving all the time.
Absolutely.
Asking interesting questions is the deepest and most important skill humans possess. That is what science is. When Einstein asked a question of the universe, will light be bent by the gravitational pull of a distant star? That is a conjecture that AI could test, but Demis Hassabis, who is the founder of DeepMind, it's a Google subsidiary, he recently won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. AI is miles away from being able to ask questions of that level of imagination and creativity. This is, for the time being, a uniquely human skill. And whilst I worry a great deal about the risk that AI poses, there's no doubt in my mind this is a relatively new technology. I agreed with what Ash says about the risks to young people. But those nations that harness it effectively will be deploying critical skills in synergy with these AIs to do extraordinary things.
Yeah. Let me take another question from Lisa Jackson.
So the government are building lots of new houses, but where is the much needed infrastructure coming from? We need more doctors, more schools, more dentists.
Well, some may take issue on this panel with the government building lots of houses, or even the previous government. But so just, I know there's a lot of building work going on around in Bishop Stortford. In fact, you can see a new housing development from this school, and there's a new town planned not far from here. Tell me about your experience.
I mean, I don't live in a new build, but it's just.
But this is clearly an issue for you. So why is it?
Just because it's really hard. You know, I know people who haven't had dentists for 3 years because they can't get an NHS dentist. We live in a lovely town. It's a lovely market town, and it's just gridlocked all the time. And you know, we're expanding so quickly, but we're not keeping up with it.
And there's a man just stuck his hand up as well.
Yeah, I live in a little village not far from here, and there's been 600 or 700 houses put in, but no extra roads. So all of a sudden, it's gridlock. I can't understand the thinking behind that.
Lisa? And this is something I have to say that comes up on Question Time again with housing. Well, there's two aspects to it. There are not enough houses, and they're not affordable to buy or rent. And then others saying there are new houses, but there's nothing to go with them.
And all of that's true, and they're all right. So in my patch in Stockport, this current government is doubling the target for the number of houses that need to be delivered, and that means that a load of the green belt that we really value in my patch, because we're on the outskirts of Greater Manchester, is going to be built on, and the government's going to make the council allow permissions to do that. And it's going to take powers away from the locally elected people who would maybe want to do things differently to do that. Where I agree with the government is that we do need more homes. Homes are too expensive. We do need a lot more homes, but they need to be the right homes in the right places. What we're seeing in Stockport is a really successful implementation of the Mayoral Development Corporation, which is where public and private enterprises are working together and looking at things in a really strategic way. It's in Stockport Town Centre. And it's it's baking in the doctors, the dentists, the bus stops, the new train stations. It's really thinking about how do we do this so that people aren't just there. It may be a really nice new home, but there's no road to get them there, or the road that gets them there is absolutely jammed every day. So talking about productivity, people are sitting in the car for 90 minutes to get to work, which is an absolute waste of time. So I think we need to think about that as a really good, successful model. One of the reasons it's successful, actually, is because it's cross-party. And so you get all the politicians in the room early and you iron out some of that political heat. And we want it as a community. What we don't want is a load of quite uninspiring homes being built on actual patches of land that we really value, and where the climate impact, the nature impact of that is not something that we want to weigh up. So I absolutely get where the question is coming from. It's the same concerns coming from my community too.
So Heidi, what is going wrong? Because we hear this time again on Question Time, that there are new developments going up, but there's nothing going up to support them in terms of a school, a doctor's surgery, a dentist, as you were saying.
That's undoubtedly true, and that has happened over the last 15 years. And I think inadequate planning has happened at a local level. We will change that as the Labour government. So if you look at the announcement that we made at Labour Party conference, we talked about creating 3 new towns, one at Tempsford, which is on the outskirts of Cambridgeshire, one in Leeds, in the heart of Leeds actually, Leeds South Bank, and one at Cruise Hill in Enfield. And we are specifically choosing those locations because we know that we're investing in transport infrastructure. So if I take the example of Tempsford, that's at the junction of the new East-West Railway, which will connect Oxford and Cambridge and the East Coast Main Line. We're investing in additional public transport, a mass transit system in West Yorkshire, in Leeds, so that we can make sure if we're building the homes that people have got a decent public transport system.
And what about other things other than transport? Of course, is important.
Yeah.
But what about extra schools, extra doctors' surgeries, extra dentist surgeries? What about that?
Yeah. So what has happened historically is that those should have been negotiated through Section 106 agreements with the local council, and certainly in my area in Swindon, when new homes have been built, where those negotiations have been done properly, you will see new primary schools, new childcare facilities, new GP surgeries. We've got to get building as a country, though, and I really do need to be clear about this, because I meet people every week when I knock on doors who tell me that they've got 30-year-old children living at home with the partners and the children of sons and daughters because they simply cannot afford to buy a house. And I do need to point out to other members of this panel that when we have sought reforms to the planning system of the sort that Matthew was talking about earlier, all the other parties represented on this panel, when we are backing the builders, they have blocked the reforms to the planning system. Look, you can argue about that, but you've got decisions as politicians. You either get on and build in the right way so that you are providing the infrastructure that is needed as well.
I've given you an example of the Mayoral Development Corporation, which does that.
Or you say,
power away from communities.
We're quite happy and we're happy for people not to be able to afford a home.
No one can hear what you're saying, and then it's a complete waste of time for you both. Woman there.
All I want to sort of raise really is the school-aged children moving in here, this particular development. Where are they all going to go? There's this nice shiny school here for boys. Where are the primary school kids going to go? Where are the nursery kids?
Okay, we hear you. Man here.
This school, I think, was actually built as part of the conditions for all the houses that have been built around it. So that does happen, and there are lots of new primary schools in Bishop Stortford as well. It's really easy to come up with reasons why, this isn't right, that isn't right, but I can't believe I'm channeling Donald Trump, but, I think you just got to get on and build.
Yeah. That's right. Build, baby, build.
Yeah, absolutely.
Helen.
I think on schools, this is a good example, and I've seen it in my constituency where there's been a lot of new housing, generally not popular, but new schools have been built. The problem with doctors has been a shortage of supply of doctors themselves. we opened new medical schools around the country so that thousands more doctors are in training. The first set of graduates from a new medical school serving my constituency in Kent graduated a few weeks ago. Very exciting moment, so more doctors to go into those GP surgeries. What I see particularly, though, is a lack of transport infrastructure and more traffic. And so in my constituency, Faversham Mid-Kent, there are thousands more homes on the way, and I have no confidence. Heidi, you said the government will change that. I have no confidence that's going to come with more traffic, more road infrastructure. And these are houses being built on greenfield sites, on quality agricultural land in the countryside. And I think this,
and was
the
the
government
decision to build them taken under this government or your government?
Well, we're waiting right now to know
who took that decision?
whether... So
Was it
the
a
decisions are on their
Conservative
way. So the decision for the biggest development of 8,500 homes just outside Sittingbourne, but mainly in my constituency, is with the Housing Secretary right now, and we're waiting to hear. But as I said, I have no confidence that we will get the infrastructure, and I don't want that to go ahead because it's a huge greenfield site. And what I'm very disappointed with seeing this huge amount of agricultural land under threat is why has the government reduced the housing ambitions for cities, reduced the housing ambitions for London, for instance? Our cities in the UK are much less dense than cities in other countries, like Paris, for instance. Why is there not more building in the cities where very specifically people don't need to all have cars the way you need it if you live in the countryside? There is the public transport infrastructure. To me, that is where the development should be focused.
Do you want to answer that before I go around the rest of the panel? Why not more building in cities? So the number of buildings in London has been reduced. I think Helen is right about that.
Well, look, I think that one of the examples I gave you earlier, Leeds South Bank, which is one of the new towns that we were talking about earlier, that is in a city centre location. Cruise Hill is in Enfield, which is on the outskirts of London. That's the third new town location that we were talking about. There are huge numbers of homes that go up in city centres. They are the most sustainable location to build because often the public transport is better there than it is in other parts of the country.
It's a fact that London's targets have been brought down. That is a fact that London was already underperforming for years under its Labour mayor, and now its targets have been brought down. I will say the other thing is what you guys can do, and I hope you'll do this.
Other parts of the country, other than London.
Another opportunity.
They want new homes in other parts of the country.
I'll give you another opportunity,
London.
which is you can follow our lead, get rid of stamp duty, and that will help people downsize, because there are many people who actually would like to downsize.
And where are you going to get the £12 billion to invest in public services?
I've said
stamp duty
where we said. I said where we would set out where we'll make our savings.
It's not worth the paper it's written on, Helen. Your proposals for welfare cuts, that £23 billion is absolutely fantastic.
We have set out how we'll do it.
Can I look? Take a step back. I've been watching Question Time for a while. You mentioned it already. I'm 54, believe it or not.
You're outing our ages.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? I know, oil of you. Well,
sorry,
but I was just going to say, you said, Fiona, we hear it all the time. Haven't we heard it for ages? Oh, we have this project here where the houses are being built, and this is being done here, and the infrastructure. Look at the aggregate data. Housing development in this country are, at a global level, incredibly low because we have the most restrictive planning laws in the world. And the tragedy for me, and it's remarkable to take a step back and look at this, is that whilst we don't plan to build housing and infrastructure and new hospitals and GPs, what has happened at the same time? Immigration into this country between 1900 and 1997 averaged 10,000 people a year. I'm the son of an immigrant, love immigration, fantastic. Under Labour, it ballooned to 200,000 a year between 1997 and 2010. That set the stage for Brexit, did it not? They told us they would control the borders. People were worried, not about immigration, but about the numbers.
Can I also just point out the Conservatives said they'd get it down to 10,000.
Oh, but let's get to the most extraordinary thing of all.
What were the figures under Boris?
Post-Brexit immigration. Boris Johnson, having said we're going to cut numbers, we're going to control the borders, it went from 200,000, and in the post-Brexit immigration, the average was 704,000.
So let's get to, so do you want to get to the point, Matthew, in terms of answering Lisa's question?
Are you saying young people can't get a home because of immigrants?
This is an extraordinary thing. We have a limited amount of infrastructure, do we not? It's not easy to flex. Politicians talk about we're doing this and that. As I say, the aggregate data shows that we're not building sufficiently. And then we have an unprecedented influx of people. Isn't it any wonder that we feel a strain on our infrastructure?
So, Matthew,
that is the greatest, in my view, and I say this again, it is the greatest betrayal of the British voters who consistently voted against that level of immigration.
I want to come back to the question. Dear Clap. I want to come back to this question about Bishop Stortford specifically, and this question of putting up houses without there being sufficient infrastructure. Part of the reason why Bishop Stortford is the place where people are wanting to build more housing, and then you've got this crisis of infrastructure, is because of the unaffordability of London. So you guys are having to deal with the London overflow because people can't afford to have families where I live. So London as a city is experiencing the closure of primary schools, not because the population of London isn't growing, it's growing quite a bit, but because people can't afford to have kids there. And people move away from the urban centres of this country, whether it's Manchester or Birmingham or Sheffield or Leeds, because they can't afford to raise their families there. So I don't think that you can talk about the pressure on infrastructure in a place like Bishop Stortford without talking about the unaffordability of a place like London. I've got friends, so we're all doing the age declaration here. I'm 33. You're supposed to say, no, you're not. I've got friends who may never own their own home in their entire life. So they don't come from wealthy parents, they're not going to be able to inherit. And over their lifetime, they're going to have put perhaps hundreds of thousands of pounds in the pockets of landlords. That could have been put together for a deposit. I mean, it probably could have bought them a flat by the time they retire. And so I think we need to talk about building more housing. That's really important. We need to talk about building more housing, looking at planning regulations, all of that's really important. But unless you deal with the fact that the rental sector has been used as a cash cow, and it's young people and families who are just starting out who are getting squeezed, you're not actually going to deal with the affordability problem. What you're going to do is build more housing stock, and it's just going to be snapped up by buy-to-let landlords because they're the ones with the cash to play with.
I've got 2 minutes left, and I want to hear a little bit from yours if I can. Yes, man over there.
Having been involved in planning for in excess of 50 years, I've seen dramatic changes. Unless government realises that the existing planning system is totally broken, the previous government didn't, this government doesn't, what they propose will never work.
Right.
To build 1.5 million houses in their term, as did the Conservative promise, is totally impractical with the current planning system. It does not work.
Can I ask you, given that you've worked in it for such a long time, if there was one thing that you would change about the planning regs as they stand, can you pick one?
We changed the rule from an outline consent that now when you apply, it becomes a very detailed consent. You will use normally, and we're doing it at the school at the moment, in excess of 20 consultants to get a planning application through, all of which can be opposed. You get one opposition and a district council will say, we'll refuse it because of it. It's a system that's totally broken.
Here.
OK. There was someone else who had their hand up. Yes, there. We've got 30 seconds left, so I'm afraid, sorry, you have to be quite quick.
Yeah, I just think the Crossrail planning from South London through to Epping and this area is a really good example of planning that's just been put on hold and blocked. But actually, when you think about it, if the rail infrastructure is developed, it also creates disruption amongst the smaller villages and things and the locals. So I guess there's a bit of a catch-22 in terms of the needs of infrastructure and the blocks that are happening with that, and then the needs for housing and the blocks that are happening for that.
Yes, it's to some people's advantage, but to others' detriment. And I guess that is the story of housing, and that is, I guess, why, Lisa, you asked your question. We are out of time. I was going to try and fit another question in, but I have not managed, so apologies for that. But you all had plenty to say, particularly on AI. I wasn't sure that was going to last quite as long as it did, but there we are. Our time is up. Thank you to the panel. Thank you very much to our audience here for coming and putting your questions. Remember, we are in Swindon next week, so if you want to come and be part of the programme. But for now, thank you very much for watching. And from Question Time in Bishop Stortford, bye-bye.